Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As you all can see, I have with me Mr. Tilak Devasher, who has written these beautiful books about Pakistan. The last one that we covered was about the Pashtuns in Pakistan. And that to me was an eye opening episode, which got me thinking, especially after reading Sir's book. What is the meaning of a Pashtun within Pakistan, and what is the relationship going to be with Pakistan of the Pashtuns going forward? And of course, a little bit on the India angle as well. So, firstly, thank you so much. I know, we've been trying to do this for a while, and it's a great pleasure always to listen to you and to actually learn from you on these particular issues, because ethnicity, as you've pointed out very clearly, is something that the world forgets when they are talking about these historical regions, and that's where I'd like to leave it. Thank you and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you so much for having me again. And it's always a pleasure to listen to your talk shows and to be a participant in your talk shows. I really enjoyed the last one that we did on my book, and this will sort of carry forward on the Pashtuns. So,
Sir,
great pleasure to be here today.
thank you, sir. So let's begin with a little bit of current affairs, and then we'll get into the whole, this thing. Just a single question: the Pakistanis have kind of, so-called, after the NSE declared war on the Taliban, Pakistani Taliban, of course. Uh, Pakistani Taliban again, largely Pashtuns. Uh, some people would interpret it as a targeted war against the Pashtuns. Some people will say this is just against the TTP. How do you look at it, sir?
You see, first, I think we should be clear that the whole purpose of the NSC was not so much the TTP as it was to send a message to the Supreme Court of Pakistan, which is, there's a lot of things happening in the Supreme Court, and unusually they've set the date for the election in the Punjab Assembly on 14th of May and directed the state to make available funds and security forces. The Election Commission requires about 350,000 security personnel. And the government is not too happy. They have their own reasons for not holding the elections now, but to make available this kind of a security force and money at a time when they don't have any funds. So this was the NSC basically, by talking so much in operational detail about taking action in this and that, was sending a message to the Supreme Court that, look, we cannot spare security forces because we are going to be running an operation against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, whenever you do an operation, and Adi, you know this well enough, you don't make an open public announcement and then you wait, for some time for the TTP to get their act together and go into hiding or escape to Afghanistan or whatever. It's just not done. In any case, operations are already continuing. What they call the buzzword in Pakistan is IBO, intelligence-based operations. I've never could understand when have any operations not been intelligence-based. So why to call it intelligence-based? So these are continuing, and every day you find that 2 people killed here, 3 people killed here, 2 people nabbed over there. So this is an ongoing thing. So it shows basically the main point was the message to the Supreme Court, and also I think telling the TTP tangentially that we are going to come after you. It's no big deal for the TTP. They've handled this for a long time, and today they are in a much better position because the Taliban are there in Afghanistan. They can always escape over there, and they know they're going to get protection and sanctuary and shelter in Afghanistan. So I think the whole purpose was different. But as far as declaring war against the TTP, I think certainly TTP's activities are an embarrassment to the Pakistan Army and the government. The way they have carried out the attacks, especially the Peshawar mosque attack, which over 100 people died. They captured the counter-terrorism department in Bannu. They've had launched attacks in Islamabad, even in Punjab, and even in Balochistan. So it is a big embarrassment for the army. And ultimately, they have to do something about it. So this was just a sort of a statement of intent, but more geared domestically towards the Supreme Court.
I'm sure that TTP is looking at it in a very interesting fashion, the way you put it across, if I may. So, Pakistan has a interesting challenge in front of it. The one thing that was keeping it together seems to be withering a little bit in there are loads of signs that people can quote for the Pakistani army having a bit of a challenge. The current guy seems to be following the same footsteps as his predecessor. Uh, so a lot of people are actually calling him Asim Munir Bajwa, for that matter. That's a name that I actually heard. With the Pakistan going down, sir, if I may ask you, the idea of Pakistan itself, which has been sold to the Pashtuns, does it still hold water with them, sir? They're a proud tribe, and I don't think they would want to sit in a ship with a hole in it.
So that's a very interesting. But before I come to the idea of Pakistan, just a little bit word about the army. Yes, the army does seem to be on the defensive. I think one thing, the biggest challenge for Asim Munir when he took over in November was to keep his flock together. Imran Khan had seriously dented, the chain of command and integrity of the Pakistan army by going after Bajwa and the other people. And there were reports that a lot of the veterans, a lot of the families of serving army officers were all pro Imran Khan. And there was a lot of tension in the army over pro and anti Imran Khan people. So I think his basic first order of the day has been to keep the army together, to bring it together, to make sure there are no divisions within the army when they need to do any kind of action. So I think that's why the army has been a little low key and Asim Munir. But if you look at the historically, an army chief is an army chief is an army chief. Once he becomes an army chief, he takes on the institutional role of the Pakistan army that has dominated Pakistan for the last 75 years. I would be very, very surprised if the Pakistan army was suddenly to lose the kind of charisma and kind of hold it has had on Pakistani politics. Yes, it has been dented, but I think they can brush themselves off and come back. And I'm sure I won't be surprised if they do come off, much to the surprise of Imran Khan and other people. So, having said that, so the idea of Pakistan was what? The idea of Pakistan was that Muslims constitute a separate nation. Right, as Junaid put it in his address in the open session of the Muslim League in Lahore in March 1940, and I just quote, he said, "The Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, literatures. Indeed, they belong to two different civilizations which are based mainly on conflicting ideas and conceptions. The Muslims are not a minority. The Muslims are a nation by any definition, and they must have their homelands, their territory, and their state." So this was the basic idea that the Muslims cannot coexist with Hindus and they must have their separate. This was the idea of Pakistan in simple terms. Jinnah's thesis, however, in fact Maulana Azad had warned him, was contrary to what Islam preached. In an interview, Maulana Azad had said, and I quote, "Pakistan is being demanded in the name of Islam. Division of territories on the basis of religion is a contraption devised by the Muslim League. They can pursue it as their political agenda, but it finds no sanction in Iran or Quran. Strictly speaking, Muslims in India are not one community. They are divided among many well-entrenched sects. You can unite them by arousing their anti-Hindu sentiments, but you cannot unite them in the name of Islam. To them, Islam means undiluted loyalty to their own sect." Unquote. Now, this is very significant because since Muslim identity was the catalyst for Pakistan's creation, this dictated that recognizing any other identity was and continues to be seen as an existential threat to its existence. Jinnah dismissed the Khudai Khidmatgar government of Dr. Khan Saab in NWFP within a week of Pakistan's creation for no real cause, except he could not accept a separate Pashtun identity. That would have vitiated his whole argument that there were only two nations, Hindus and Muslims, and only two legitimate successors to the British in India, the Congress and the Muslim League. Now, in reality, Pakistan was an artificial creation since its constituent parts in 1947 and even the truncated parts in 1971 had never existed as a single unified country. The focus of the new state thus began to forge a unified and homogeneous identity using Islamic solidarity. The perceived danger was that if the various nationalities demanded even autonomy, Pakistan might break up, as it did in the case of the Bengalis. Resultantly, the state has enforced what has been called an Islam over tribe approach, and strict centralization while it looked suspiciously at any demand for autonomy. But by insisting on a homogeneous Muslim identity, Pakistan ignored the varied, rich, and dynamic history of its nationalities that predated its existence. And hence, Pakistan has ended up alienating its own people. So, yes, if Pakistan continues to unravel and goes down, questions will be raised among the Pashtuns about the very idea of Pakistan. This will also be a hark back to Ghaffar Khan and his idea of Pashtunistan in the run up to the referendum in 1947. So, that is one thing about the idea of Pakistan will weaken for the Pashtuns. The second point is a linked issue is growing Pashtun alienation in Pakistan. You see, as a result of the Pak armies of operations in Fatah and North-South Waziristan especially, and later on in Swat, more than 2 million people were displaced, Pashtuns. They had to move into camps, refugee camps, or in the urban centers of Pakistan. Now, when these people stood in lines to receive handouts, as somebody said, the spine was ripped out of a tough and proud people. It was a combination of the indignities that accompanied displacement, the atrocities that the militants inflicted and the military operations compounded, that really led to a lot of anger among the Pashtuns. The condition of the Pashtuns in urban centers were probably even worse because they came to be racially profiled. The Pashtuns and Afghan refugees had to face, as a result of a lot of terrorist attacks, especially in Lahore, there was a widespread crackdown against anybody who looked like a Pashtun or looked like an Afghan. So much so that the police in Punjab distributed official and unofficial circulars targeting the Pashtuns and portraying them as suspected terrorists. For example, in an unofficial notification in Punjab, people were asked to inform the police immediately if they saw a street vendor in Pashtun attire or having Pashtun looks. The implication was that anybody who looked Pashtun might be a potential terrorist. Another example of profiling was that in the name of fighting terror, thousands of young Pashtun boys were picked up in urban areas, especially Karachi. In fact, if you recall, the whole entire Pashtun Tahaffuz movement started off because it's Naqibullah Masood, the Pashtun guy from the Masood tribe, was picked up and encountered. So, large number of Pashtun youth have just disappeared. Then there is this book on the Pakistan studies being taught in Punjab that contained abusive and insulting words like traitors and illiterates for the Pashtuns. As a result of such profiling, a feeling has grown that Pashtuns have not been given their due rights and status as first-class citizens of Pakistan. In fact, one Pashtun activist said, being a Pashtun is now sin in this country. And you'd be surprised, in an interview to the Caravan, a British-based magazine published in January 21, former Prime Minister Imran Khan said he had overheard instructions to kill Bengalis in 1971 when he was in Dhaka to play a cricket match. Years later, as leader of the PTI, Imran Khan said he now hears similar instructions within Pakistan. It's exactly the same language which I hear this time, adding that today it is the Pashtuns who are ill-treated. In Pindi, in Lahore and in Karachi, they've been picked up and thrown in jail because they are Pashtuns. This is coming from Imran Khan. So both in terms of the idea of Pakistan and growing Pashtun alienation, the Pashtuns will be watching the situation in Pakistan very closely.
That is, I mean, the whole description of it actually takes your breath away when you talk about stuff like that, because at the end of it, what you're looking at is I won't call it genocide, but I would call it the seeds of a genocide, sir.
Well, genocide may be a bit probably a strong word to use, but certainly the Pashtuns have been used as cannon fodder for Pakistan's foreign policy goals, and by co-opting some of them into the military and into business, the people, especially in the erstwhile tribal areas, erstwhile Fatah, have been used as jihadis, and now they are protesting. The people say, "Why? We don't want to. We want the same rights as the Punjabis have as provided for in the constitution. Why are we being treated in this manner?" And this is growing, and I think the PTM has sort of touched a very raw nerve by highlighting this kind of treatment of the Pashtuns.
So this kind of chaos normally brings in an inevitable solution. Either the population kind of folds, like what happened to the Jews in Germany, Poland, in just prior to the Second World War, or what happened to the Bengalis. They basically folded up and they kind of got hit. But in the Bengali sense of it, they also started picking up arms. Uh, the Pashtun movement in Pakistan has been rather peaceful. I mean, the Frontier Gandhi and oh nahi, we will want to work within Pakistan, and that whole thing has been propagated. I mean, the reality of it is obviously very different, but it's been propagated and has been accepted as the standard reality of the Pashtun movement, the PTM, the Pashtun Tahfuz movement. They're peaceful, they don't want to fight, they want to be apart, and this and that. But this kind of chaos will. I mean, Pashtuns are not very tolerant people, and we spoke about the Pashtun Wadi some time ago. What will be the impact of something like that on these so-called peaceful Pashtuns that we see?
You see, the Pashtun Tahafuz movement, you're talking about that, right? Specifically. For them, non-violence is an article of faith. Like Ghaffar Khan. It is an article of faith. It's their belief that only the strong can be non-violent. Somebody who knows the effect of violence can be non-violent. And also linked up with what Gandhiji was preaching during the freedom struggle. And actually, a non-violent PTM is far more difficult for the Pakistan army to tackle than the TTP. Because with a peaceful protest, how do you crack down on a peaceful protest? And therefore, you'll find that PTM has withstood many provocations and has remained peaceful. But there are fears that continuous use of heavy-handed tactics to suppress the movement could get out of hand, as has been seen in other parts of Pakistan. A similar movement launched by the people of East Pakistan eventually culminated in a movement for independence and led to the creation of Bangladesh. Similarly, it was a rights movement to begin with. And now, the Pakistani elites are making the same mistake. The PTM demand in reality is quite simple. That give us the same rights as the other nationalities within Pakistan that they have, as granted by the constitution. Don't use us as cannon fodder of foreign policy. But instead of addressing these legitimate concerns, they have resorted to a policy of persecution. As I said in the beginning, Pakistan looks very, very skeptically at any demand for autonomy or any demand for ethnicity, because they believe that Islam provides an overarching Pakistani identity, which actually does not, because these are historic states. Now, I don't see the PTM becoming violent immediately. I don't think this is going to happen right now. But there is a bigger issue, and that is the role that the PTM can play for the larger Pashtun community. See, when the Masood Tahfuz movement was transformed into the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, their leader Manzoor Pashtun assumed a pan-Pashtun role, representing the entire ethnic community. He was no longer confined to his tribe or to his youth. So the moot question is, with such a large following in the form of Hata, can the PTM present a united political vision for Pashtuns in Pakistan? Or would he accept the existing divisions within the Pashtuns along the same old regional lines of KPK and Northern Balochistan? He will similarly have to address even the bigger question of peace in the formal tribal areas. This would not be possible without a peaceful Afghanistan. So, seen in this context, would the PTM stand for cohesion of the historical Pashtun nationalist narrative, or will they be satisfied with the divided Pashtun identity on both sides of the Durand line? And if he stands for a collective Pashtun identity, will he be willing to and able to transcend tribal, regional, and even national affiliations? And I think the only way this can be done is through non-violence, through not picking up the gun. And because if you pick up the gun, then it's easier for a superior force to attack you. Of course, the advantage that the Pashtuns have is that the territory is extremely difficult for the Pakistan army to operate. But even in the cities and the urban areas and in the plains, a peaceful movement, 20,000, 30,000 people getting together. Because don't forget, the Pashtuns, unlike the Baloch, have the critical mass of population. They are a critical mass. 20,000, 30,000 people collecting in one place, protesting peacefully, the Pakistan army will find it extremely difficult to tackle. So I think non-violence is a definite, they believe in it, and it's a very positive tactic.
It's against their nature, isn't it, sir? How do you
Yes,
control? You mentioned the population size. How do you control these guys who carry an AK-47 just as a part of their clothes?
because, as Ghaffar Khan preached, and Gandhiji also praised that, they were the most non-violent people amongst the people who were the most violent. And only when you know the adverse effects of violence can you be non-violent. Ghaffar Khan saw what Pashtun Wali's system of badal or revenge had done to society. So he wanted to act against that. And that is the kind of framework which the PTM is following.
One must commend their levels of communication amongst them, sir, if that is the case, that they've been able to
And
actually do this
tolerance.
thing.
And tolerance and strength, inner strength.
I mean, I don't think, let's say, a Punjabi would be quiet for that long. I mean, or a Kashmiri for that matter would be quiet for that long. He will pick up his weapon. He'll probably not care about what the leaders are saying, and that's quite commendable, as a matter of fact. Uh, how do these guys explain themselves a part of being a part of the TTP, who are pretty much asking, and I want to shift the discussion onto that a little bit, who are pretty much asking for a very violent solution to this problem, sir? How do they have any contacts? Do they have any? Is this a cohesive movement, or this is another way and this is another way?
Yeah, I think there are two different ways. You see, the TTP are products of Pakistani madrasas, right? Where they have been ideologically trained to believe that Sharia needs to be implemented all over Pakistan, especially in the FATA areas. And that is the way forward. So this is their ideological belief, core belief, which they don't want to compromise on. Likewise with the Taliban in Afghanistan, they have a core belief that their understanding of what Sharia is it. This comes from the Quran, they don't want to argue about it. Even when people tell them that there are 51 other Muslim countries who don't follow the kind of Sharia which you are following, they say, well, they must be wrong. This is this is our understanding. And nobody has been able to. The OIC, the Al Azhar clerics, the Saudi clerics have not been able to convince them otherwise. So, coming back to the TTP, this is an article of faith with them. This is where they ideologically are totally different from the PTM. The PTM believe in non-violence, they believe in democracy, they believe in elections, they believe in civil rights, they believe in human rights. Whereas the TTP is the other reverse. For them it's Sharia. I mean, what is this constitution? What is democracy? There is an Amirul Mu'mineen, that's it. So the TTP and the PTM totally coming from different ideological backgrounds, different philosophies. The TTP wants to impose Sharia. But interestingly, of late, last 1 year or so, the TTP has also started adopting a Pashtun ethno-nationalistic line. Their Amir, Nurwali Muhammad, he stated in a couple of interviews that their land has been taken over by the Pakistan army. They need to sort
Get
of
it back, yes.
free their land and
Hmm.
impose their own governance. So they are also adopting a ethno-nationalistic line. I think taking a leaf from the popularity of the PTM. So while they have not given up on Sharia, they are underplaying Sharia, but pushing this line. Now, this is something which is even more disturbing for the Pakistan army, because if a TTP starts pushing this, on the other side you have the Taliban, who have not accepted the Durand line. They have uprooted the fence and they said it's an unresolved issue. So Pakistan army doesn't get its act together. They could well be faced with a Pashtun pincer. Taliban on that side who don't accept the Durand line, which means attacking the sovereignty and integrity of Pakistan, and the TTP on this side who want demerger of FATA from KPK and talking about administering their own areas. So Pakistan is going to get squeezed between this pincer, and this could then grow into a larger Pashtun movement. So that is the kind of fault line that we are looking at, and that's the kind of danger that is lurking for Pakistan if they don't get their act together.
That's what brings me to the next question. There are these hidden reports coming out that the TTP has taken some swaths of land in KP and NFWP and all that entire region, and they have started collecting taxes. Of course, that was the case earlier as well. In Swat and all those areas, people didn't go because the local tribal heads were this thing. But the rumor has it that there's been a deal between the TTP and the local tribal leaders who's accepting their tax collection because of the Pashtun connection, sir. Uh, I don't know, it's nowhere to confirm this, but how significant do you think something like this is?
You see, reports of their controlling areas, I don't think so it's true. Because if they were to set up any so called liberated areas, it will be very easy for Pakistan to bomb them out of existence. So they are not any liberated areas, as it were. Tax collection or having their own courts or imposing their own sort of standards of justice is par for the course. Whenever, even in the past, earlier, before Operation Zarbeaz, they would go there. Wherever they go, they try and squeeze the people as much as they can because they also require funds. Today, they're in a better position because you have Taliban in Afghanistan. So they have not, that kind of. So I don't think so there are any liberated or free areas. But what people are confusing this with is that Nur Wali Masood sent out a message to the Pakistani ulema. Is that we studied in the same madrasas where you were the teachers. You taught us about jihad. You said jihad is valid. So tell us now, where is it that we are going wrong? Are we not following jihad as you had trained us and you had taught us? So now this has placed the Pakis in a very, Paki ulemas in a very strange position. In 2018, Pakistan came out with this something called Paigam-e-Pakistan, in which about 1,000 clerics got together and they talked about against hate speech, against killing, against the kind of activities they had preached pre 2018, because Pakistan also found that this experiment was going wrong and this was getting out of hand. Then recently also some ulamas in KPK came out with a fatwa saying that only a state can declare jihad and not any organization. So what the TTP has done, they have declared themselves as a vilayat, as a government, and appointed shadow governors for various districts. So a lot of people confuse this with holding on to territory. Now this is basically a tactic to tell the ulama that look, we have a governance structure and therefore we have declared jihad against Pakistan. There's nothing wrong with that, and this is what you taught us. So, so it's something which has to be fought also on the ideological level to not only the military level but also the ideological level to convince their followers that what the GTP is doing is not really correct.
I want to talk about the TTP leadership, sir, but your last statement has put me into a conundrum because when I look at the Pakistani army and the heads and the leaders of the Pakistani army today, uh, comparing that with the leaders of the erstwhile Pakistani army, guys like Hamid Gul and stuff like that, who knew this area, who knew the people, who knew this and that. The guys sitting on the desks today seem that disconnected with the reality of what you're trying to say, because this is a complicated subject which requires a lot of ethnicity, a lot of study, a lot of understanding of the game. Uh, I wonder how many people in Pakistan even know the complexity of handling a tribe or a ethnicity or whatever you may want to call them with such a fervor within their hearts. Do you think that the current leadership in Pakistan, and I'm not talking about the political leadership, I'm talking about the leadership that matters, does have the understanding of this in-depth segment that you just brought out, sir?
A lot of the Pakistan Army leadership is Punjabi. So it's difficult, conventional wisdom would be difficult for the Punjabi to understand. But since they have been fighting against the TTP since 2004, a large number of army officers have come up through the ranks who have had first-hand experience of fighting the TTP in Waziristan, in North and South Waziristan, and other areas of erstwhile fighters. So they definitely have the experience and the expertise. I'm not sure they are at the decision-making levels of being co-commanders or being, in the ISI or whatever. But certainly there is a wealth of experience in the Pakistan Army. I'm talking not only about the Pashtuns, who are the military officers, but even amongst the Punjabis who have fought on the ground. So they have this understanding. But the Punjabi attitude towards other nationalities is a bit patronizing. In fact, I'll give you a very classic example, even though it was Ayub Khan who was a Pashtun himself. So when Eisenhower visited Pakistan in 1958, this is 11 years after Pakistan was created, he told Eisenhower that, the Afghans are not so much Muslims as they are opportunistic. He was underestimating and being patronizing about somebody, the state of which started getting created in 1747, 2 centuries before Pakistan was created. And they were Muslims for far longer than some of the ethnic groups in Pakistan itself. Yet, he had the gall to tell Eisenhower that the Afghans are not Muslims half as much as they are opportunists. So, this is the kind of underestimating the Pashtuns which the Punjabis have been doing. And that's one reason why they are in such a. Musharraf, for example, Musharraf knew nothing about the tribal areas. He just sent in his forces, and the whole thing blew up in 2004 with various operations. Then in 2007 in Lal Masjid, not realizing what is the core value, the Pashtun Wali, what it means to a Pashtun, and how revenge is such an important part of their existence. So once it's like putting your hand in a beehive. Now all the bees are circulating around, and they don't know what to do with it.
That's an interesting analogy. May I ask you something? Because at the end of it, you will have a growing sense of frustration within the Pashtuns itself. Uh, the leadership has done a great job by actually putting across uh, the non-violence, as you very beautifully explained, that it's damn difficult to fight non-violence at the end of it. And especially an aggressive Pakistani army, they probably find it very, very difficult. How do you counter these guys? Having said that, do the Pashtuns have started gaining a certain amount of regret? Because when
Sorry.
they see what's happening in Afghanistan, sir, at the barrel of the gun, they got their country. So the violent Pashtuns, which are the TTP, and the non-violent Pashtuns, which are the PTM, at some point of time, do you think these guys will merge their paths and say, listen, we need to figure something out? If you look
You see
at
the
Indian independence, this thing, so it was the same. There was a non-violent movement and there was a violent movement, or there was, as they called it, Subhash Chandra Bose faction and the other faction. A lot of our people are today saying that it was both of these guys and the kind of pressure that they were able to exert on the British government that they had to kind of do what they have to. And a lot of it is attributed towards the violent side. Do you think the TTP leadership and the PTM leadership will try and kind of merge their ways somewhere in the middle?
as far as the TTP is concerned, they have gained a lot of strength because of the Taliban military takeover of Kabul in August 21. In fact, one of the first things that the Taliban did was they released about 1500 to 1800 TTP cadres, including some leaders, which really bolstered the strength of the TTP. So the TTP will continue on this violent path. The Taliban example is very encouraging for them that through violence and through warfare, you can achieve your objectives. The PTM, as I mentioned, coming from a different ideological perspective, and at the moment, the PTM is a rights movement, right? They're not talking about they're talking about rights within the constitution of Pakistan, within the framework of Pakistan. They are not talking about any kind of separatism. They're not talking about any kind of establishing their own form of governance or anything like that. So at the moment, it's not going to happen. Yes, if they continue to be suppressed, if they continue to be browbeaten and continue to be pushed to the wall, then you don't know what will happen tomorrow. But if you say today, I think they are both going to pursue their respective goals separately. TTP asking for their own area in the erstwhile FATA, and PTM talking about a rights movement.
That's very significant because at the end of it, you will have the attacks you have. I mean, not you will. You have the attacks which have changed them from the TTP itself, have changed in modus operandi. So they would hit civilians earlier, and I guess that gave them some sort of a pushback, saying, "I mean, don't do that." Today, when we see the attacks, they are predominantly, and you mentioned this, do idhar gaye, char idhar gaye, and as a matter of fact, they've had a high of 11 to 15 soldiers in a day. So it's a very targeted attack on the Pakistani army, sending a very clear message.
And police, especially the police in KPK.
Yes, yes. How do you think that the leadership of this particular faction is kind of changing the way that they operate for whatever they want to gain?
No, certainly it's a very valid point that instead of just blind suicide bombing in which there are a large number of civilian casualties, it is very tight. Even this Peshawar mosque attack was in an area which is inhabited or a residential area of the police. So most of the people who were killed in that attack were policemen. So they are targeting specifically the security forces. You see, once you break the morale in any insurgency, once you break the morale of the security forces, you target them. Then you will find that the security forces also will think twice before carrying out an operation against you. And especially in the case of the Pashtuns, this is what under Musharraf they found, that the frontier corps was largely consisted of the soldiers were Pashtuns. And the TTP on the other side were also Pashtuns, and some came from the same area, some came from the same tribe. And they knew the guy, though he's in uniform today, if he kills a TTP guy, his family will get after his family for the next couple of generations. So they have to be very careful on what the targeting is. So once you break the morale of the security forces, this is what the TTP is doing at the moment. Whether it is especially in KPK. They've also attacked Miawali, for example, which is in Punjab. In Balochistan, they have carried out attacks. They have tied up with a Baloch group and carrying out, spreading their tentacles there. They've targeted the Chinese in POK. So they are just spreading themselves out, and they just show how vulnerable these security forces are. So far, they know they can't fight pitched battles. They can't do that. So it is just hit and run, ambushes, targets of opportunity, and so on. So yes, it's a very difficult situation for the Pakistan army, and that's how their tactics of the TTP have changed. They still have enough suicide bombers, I think, with them to I guess, as a last resort. You see, the suicide bombing is very interesting. How it came about in the Pashtun areas. During the British time, the Pashtuns could tackle the British by stationing people on hilltops. And from hilltops, they would fire at the British who were coming up the mountains. Against the Russians, they didn't have an answer till the Americans gave them the Stinger missile. and then with stingers they could take out American helicopters. Against drones, the Pashtuns had no answer, neither the Taliban nor the TTP. So then they came up with this idea of a suicide bomber where the human being himself becomes the bomb because they couldn't tackle the drone. So this was the way to hit back at the Americans by using suicide bombers. That's how the evolution of the suicide bomber has actually taken place among the Pashtun areas.
I guess that's the whole point of this discussion that I wanted to ask you is what are their learnings, and that's interesting because they do learn, so that
Yeah,
it's going to be evolution.
evolving all the time, evolving. And
Absolutely.
now, because of the equipment that the Americans have left behind, they even have night vision goggles. The TTP has night vision. So that's again a scary thing as far as the army is concerned.
It's evolution, sir. So my last question to you, and a lot of people have started talking about the eventual end game of Pakistan. People have mentioned that it is now, and this is I would say a lot of analysts have kind of agreed to the factor that this is somewhere the beginning of the end of Pakistan. I at the moment, I can't see that particular light, but fair enough. Taking that as a point, a lot of people have put out scenarios like Lebanization, Balkanization, and Somaliaization of Pakistan. Uh, how would you kind of term one the idea that it would break up because of economics, which I find to be very ridiculous? Uh, I'm just putting it out there. You might critique me on that as well, sir. But this whole concept that it would break into these little pieces that would remain together as a Lebanization or Somaliaization, that the entire thing will be there, but there'll be different aspects of it, and it'll be ruled differently, and it'll be at war with each other even at certain places. Or the Balkanization, where separate lines and separate countries are kind of created out of the entity called Pakistan, sir. Any thoughts on this particular thing?
I think one bottom line is so long as the chain of command, the unity and the integrity of the Pakistan army holds, it will keep Pakistan together. It will not allow Pakistan to break up in the sense that you have mentioned. Yes, what will be the quality of life of the people given the economic crisis, given the political crisis, given the judicial crisis that is happening today? So Pakistan is actually being put. In fact, in my 2016 book, Pakistan Quoting the Abyss, it's here lying. I was just going through it the other day, and I mentioned one line, and I asked a question. Is Pakistan then ungovernable, or have its leaders, or the leaders don't have the capacity to govern Pakistan? Now, this is something to be discussed and debated. Is it ungovernable, or the leadership cannot govern it? And I said the jury is out. Now, the jury was out in 2016. Today, it's a far more critical and an existential question than it was in 2016. And I feel that the challenges of Pakistan have grown far beyond the capacities and the capabilities of the leadership to tackle and resolve. Take the economics of it. Even if they get the loan from the IMF, from Saudi Arabia pitches in, China pitches in, UAE pitches in, it'll work for 4 to 6 months. What happens 4 to 6 months down the road? Unless Pakistan is able to generate enough resources internally. Today, the net income of the Pakistan government is going in debt servicing. Everything else, from the military budget to the developmental funds to the salaries, it's all on borrowed money. How does a country survive? I mean, this is hardly a model for survival. So yes, the quality of life is certainly good. You have stories about people dying in stampedes for Rata. 12 women and children died in Karachi on a stampede. So you will have, so the quality of life and the problems that they will have are there. But I still feel that so long as the Pakistan army retains its essential unity, Pakistan will hold together. So Imran Khan is doing everything that he can to destroy that unity and integrity of the Pakistan Army. The way he's attacked Bajwa and company, as somebody said, na, there's nothing that India could have done so much of damage as what Imran Khan has done.
Sometimes I really wonder if that's. I mean, he's out to break the country and kind of claim a small area, crown himself king, and live whatever 5-10 years he's got to live. I don't know. I mean, it's a wild
Just
thought,
the
but
ambition of one man, the ambition of one man to get back into power is causing and has caused so much of devastation to the country. And the fact is, the people who support him, the so-called Yuthias, just seem to be blind
blind.
to his faults, to the fact that he has nothing to offer. Even the recent 10-point plan which he came up with just talks about getting money from the diaspora. I'll improve tourism, I'll improve the MSC. How will you do it? Everybody knows. How will you do it? Where is the money? Where is the investment? I think the important thing will be the Pakistan Army to keep the 4 provinces together. Now, how long they will be able to do that, that's a different question. That's a different question. But
I wanted to say that I'm going to leave that for now because I'm going to trouble you again for that. And probably, you said that particular line that stuck with me, and I'm going to
yeah,
think about it.
I was amazed I had written that. See, is Pakistan then ungovernable, or are its leadership incapable of governing Pakistan?
We need to debate this. Sir. This has to
Yeah,
have people who can kind
yeah.
of
You can have
take
a
this.
separate session. You can have a separate podcast of this, and
Yeah.
because it's a very crucial question. In fact, that tomorrow, uh, people keep talking about this, but this particular phrase as a subject of either of a conference or of a podcast, I think would be very valuable at this stage.
Absolutely, because I honestly got blindsided when you say that when you said that because that thing was the reason. My first thoughts on something like that was what would be the reason for that, and that's a question that you would ask before you actually get into a discussion of this sort. Is that let's take it yes or no, and in either cases, I would try and find out what would be the reasons why they would do. Either it's stupidity or it's a plan or whatever it is. So one would have to design the reasons and then kind of debate it further with regards to which reason kind of fits into this entire thing. That's a beautiful discussion that needs to be had. Along with, of course, you mentioned the army, and one of the things I wanted to ask you and leave a little bit of a thought where you could probably enlighten us in the future is that the psychology and the mindset of Pakistani armies
I have a
has.
complete paper on this, on Pakistani Army's mindset towards India. You know, how. So that's a very interesting subject for a discussion itself.
Because I've been thinking, and with a lot of things that comes across, that the army is basically out for survival. It needs to keep its state. I'm bound to believe that army is more of a business organization that wants to keep its moolah flowing in. With ex-Pakistani army generals actually saying, "Don't switch off the golf courses, yaar, baki sab band kar do," because golf courses are a source of fresh air for the people of Pakistan. I was, it kind of brought to bear the factor that either these guys are really stupid or they've been sold a particular narrative which is so hard on to them and they're not able to shake that off, no matter what happens to their country or to even themselves. And that we've seen happening. I mean, there's a good old Sanskrit saying, "Vilanshikale viprita buddhi." So, sir, let me say this. I've troubled you with a time when you're recovering from a sickness, but you've been gracious enough to give me that time. I'm grateful because trust you me, with all that you're going through, you've been able to actually tingle a lot of fancy in me, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers are going to find this and keep on saying, "Adi, this is something that we need to do again. We need to do again." And a lot of people will
Thank,
not
thank,
be very happy.
thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
sir. A
Adi.
lot.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure talking to you in a freewheeling kind of a discussion. And it's great anytime you feel like talking again. Just let me know. I'll be there.
I
Thank
hope
you so
I
much.
hope you recover fast, and let's plan a podcast with some more enthusiasts and try and see if we can come up with a debate as to try and understand who spoiled Pakistan. For now, sir, thank you so much and Jai
Thank
Hind.
you so much. Thank you, Adi. Thank you.